All right. So today, wait, it's my turn to start.
We talked about this, and I said, you always start.
Here we go.
I never get to start, and you always take the lead, and it's always the Beth and Deb show. Which, I mean, that's the name of the show, and I know we agreed about that, but sometimes...
We did, because Beth and Deb sounds better than Deb and Beth. Remember, we were like, Deb,
Yeah, we did say that.
We did. We've said that, and so why do you keep bringing it up?
I just feel like...
Here we go, you and your feelings.
Beth, this is a great time, I think, to talk with our viewers of the Beth and Deb show. I'm Deb.
And I'm Beth.
And today we've modeled for you some fighting, which happens in any relationship.
Any relationship.
Right? So today we're going to talk about fighting. This is our little series about conflict because, boy, do you like conflict?
No.
No. That is one. No.
And I think most people will say, if they have awareness, I do not like conflict.
Most people go to great lengths to avoid conflict until it just can't be avoided any longer.
And then we crash.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then that's when conflict really becomes a problem.
Yeah.
Is when there's a huge blow up,
right? And I think it starts, shocker, awareness.
Oh my gosh.
Here we go again, right?
Awareness.
So we talk about awareness almost every video.
That's almost the first step of every kind of issue. If you're wanting to work on something, first you have to really take the time to think about it within yourself.
Right, to become aware. Yeah, so as psychologists and faculty members, we talk to students and clients a lot about a number of topics, and it almost always starts there. But I think one of the biggest pieces of awareness for fighting fair is realizing that conflict is a part of any relationship.
Sure.
Right? Whether it's a friendship, it's a romantic relationship, it's a family relationship. Conflict is a part of any relationship. And I think it's important to realize what makes conflict okay and what makes it like, oh, this maybe isn't so good. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So realize that conflict comes because we both have two different upbringings that have shaped who we are, right? And so you have a different view on the world, and I have a different view on the world based on how we were raised and the things that matter to us. And so I think the first step to really realizing having better awareness is not to be surprised or crushed or, oh my gosh. I talk to couples who they say, we have not had an argument. And I'm like, isn't that cute? Just wait till it comes. Yeah. Because then what happens is they're shocked or they're surprised or they think, oh my gosh, I got to break up with him because we're fighting.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily the case, right? It's like first realize, don't be shocked or surprised if you have an argument.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point of like people have different perspectives. Their perspective isn't wrong.
Yes,
right?
That's
It's not that you're right
point.
and they're wrong, or that they're right and you're wrong. It's just that you have different needs, wants, expectations that maybe weren't all made clear in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
I know that being married for a long time, when we started out, we had different expectations of how things were going to go, and that we never had really talked about. So, and that's true not just for like relationships, but for friendships, work environments, family environments, anything. It's just coming at it, trying to, I think the key is not trying to be right, but trying to understand like what's going on with everybody's perspective. So it's really more about learning about how the other person sees the world and what they need and want, and how those things can work together. And that doesn't sound bad. Like when you phrase it like that, that's not a horrible thing. It's actually a healthy part of a relationship to be able to talk about those things and to come to some sort of agreement. But that's not how it usually goes, because it ends up turning into more of an argument, a right and wrong, who gets their way.
Yeah, I think it requires a pause, right?
Yeah.
It requires you to be like, okay, hold on a second, right? And John Gottman, who is, I know we're both big fans of the Gottman Institute and the work that they do with couples, but one of the things that I read recently from them,
we're out of focus,
is
our faces.
There we go. We're back.
Okay. So John Gottman.
Yeah, so one of the things that I recently read from John Gottman out of the Gottman Institute was some version of we've got to focus on being curious rather than being correct. Right. So like you were just saying, to develop a deeper understanding of one another. And I think that takes a pause, right? Most of us want to defend our point. We're right, you're wrong. Instead, let me be curious about what I can learn about you, about us, about how things are going. I think if we can take that pause, it keeps it from blowing up.
And coming back to that is emotions,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like one of the number one reasons that people avoid conflict is because emotions are such a big part of that. And we don't like to feel like, I always want to cry when I'm in conflict or arguing.
Sure.
So of course I don't want to like approach that because I know I'm gonna become vulnerable
And cry
when I'm arguing. But if we can learn that, like, okay, emotions are gonna come, that's gonna be okay, and we can work through this, then that'll help us be more willing to approach those conflict situations too.
Yeah, that's great too. I think one other part is what's healthy fighting.
Yeah.
And what's abusive.
Yeah.
You know, so should I stay? Is this part of like a healthy relationship? And we're going to talk a little bit more in another video about fighting and conflict styles and that sort of thing. But really, I think let's talk just briefly. Normal fighting versus abusive. So what comes to mind for you? And I'll share a little bit of my thoughts too.
For normal fighting?
Normal fighting versus abusive.
Well,
when you talk to clients, what do you see in terms of patterns? And
I have never seen like perfect conflict or fighting styles, but there's a range of normal, right? Like, so I know for me, for my husband and I, we don't always start out the best, most rational, like we may, things may get heated for a little bit, but then we're able to calm ourselves down, come back to the issue and talk it out with respect and, trying to understand each other. And even though it's not perfect, it works and it ends up with a healthy resolution. So I think there's a lot of different ways people can approach it. But once it gets to the point where it's abusive in nature, or there's a lot of meanness, name calling, putting down, criticizing, blaming, just stuff that if old wounds get rehashed and those are things that probably need to be worked through, worked out. A lot of things should be avoided during conflicts, and we'll talk about that more during other segments of what's okay and what's not okay.
Yeah, I think anytime it becomes physical,
oh, absolutely, that's
that leans definitely toward abusive fighting.
Yes,
that we really
it doesn't lean; it jumps into abuse. That's
right
never okay, right?
Yeah, becoming physical. Means this is probably not a healthy relationship for me.
Absolutely.
If one or the other of us cannot maintain our self-control, that our emotions are taking over and we get physical. I think, like you said, name calling, put downs that we can't resolve from continuing to keep score, and we'll talk more about those tips too. But I think just as kind of a beginning to our Fighting Fair series, I think this is a good start to realize conflict is something that happens in every relationship.
It's normal.
Be prepared for it, going into it, know that this comes because we have different perspectives, and realizing if I'm feeling unsafe, this relationship is not good, then maybe you should follow those instincts.
Yeah.
And we'll talk more. If you have other questions for us, feel free to go ahead and give them a shout out, and we will have some additional videos for you coming up. Bye-bye.